Chapter 4, Showdown at Midnight. The Legend of Sunset Shimmer, Majora's Mask. By Ganondorf 8. September 28, 2015. Chapter 4, Showdown at Midnight.
Hey! You there, Deku Scrub! What are you doing? I just happened to come into the area because of hearing about the robbery that took place here,
I replied.
Surprised that a Deku would be in the know, but yes, there was a recent crime, and this poor woman was the victim. An unusual woman who had been prancing about suddenly came up to her according to witness accounts, and stole a bag which contained large-sized bomb bags which were intended for the bomb shop located in West Clock Town. No one saw the face of the thief, yet she prances about as though she were dancing or something.
There was definitely no doubt in my mind that the one responsible was Lightning Dust, and I still feel bad about not doing something to prevent this robbery from happening. Upon thinking about it for a while, I had no idea of her true motives, so I can't exactly be guilty given she just wanted me to leave her alone. Still, I wish that I could somehow reverse time, and stop her from stealing from this old lady who still appears pretty shaken up. But who would want to steal a bag filled with bomb bags? Normally, a thief would either try to steal a lot of money, or something of incredible value which they then try to sell or give back in exchange for even more money. Then again, Lightning Dust could desire destruction by using those bombs in a horrible way, but I don't think she would sink down to such a low level. I then overheard the soldier and the old lady say that this hasn't been the first time someone has been robbed, so it seems Lightning Dust has quite a track record. Then maybe she has some kind of hideout in Termina, but where would such a place even be? I doubt she would have it in Clock Town, as that would be too obvious, so it must be somewhere where very few would ever dare to go. The soldier then turned towards me again, for he wasn't finished dealing with me given how I accidentally came in here rather than simply staying away from the problem.
Can I help you?
I asked.
Normally, you Deku Scrubs would say something along those lines, and then lie through your mouths just to get us riled up, but for some reason I sense that you're different from others. I believe that your response will be one that doesn't end up being misleading. I did get a look at her face, I said. Really? No one else saw it, so that makes you a valuable witness. At first, I thought she was someone I had met before somewhere, but then it turned out that she was a complete stranger. Her face looked really young as though she were in her late teens, and her hair was combed in a way that resembled lightning.
I said.
Hair like lightning? Right. We'll make sure to be on the lookout for someone like that. What do you suppose the thief intends on doing with those stolen goods?
I asked.
Quite the curious Deku Scrub, aren't you? Since you provided us with some useful information, I'll answer your question in return. The bomb shop at this time of the year gets a lot of customers who want to buy explosives to celebrate the coming of the new year, but due to the high volume, many aren't able to purchase anything. So, a decision was made some time ago where the shop would begin carrying a large bomb bag designed for those who really want to have a blast. However, only those who have been given permission are allowed to purchase that larger bag. I have noticed a lack of people around here, I said. Clock Town should be packed by now, yet only a small handful have come. Could it have to do with the moon?
I asked.
I wouldn't know, for that's information which I don't have access to. Perhaps if you were to speak to Vissen, the one who's in charge of the town soldiers, you might get a better understanding, but why would you do that? Deku Scrubs aren't known for wanting to get involved in the affairs of other tribes unless they can get something out of it. Anyway, I'll escort the old lady to the bomb shop, and then come back to resume my patrol. Of course, you might try to leave town, which is against the law given how you're a child, so perhaps you should take her where she needs to go.
Just like that, I found myself being an escort all because I got involved. Luckily for me, it wasn't that far to the bomb shop given how it was roughly 2 minutes away, so when I brought the old lady there, and entered without saying a single word, I began contemplating my next course of action.
What's wrong?
Asked Twilight.
I still can't believe that Lightning Dust robbed an innocent old lady, I replied. Termina isn't like Equestria, but I'll admit that I am surprised she would do such a thing, said Twilight. It makes me wish that we could go back in time, and prevent the robbery from happening, yet I know that's impossible as time cannot be altered like that. I also feel bad that the old lady was robbed just because of how frail she was. Lightning Dust should be ashamed for what she did,
I said.
I doubt she has any conscience that would make her feel that way, Sunset Shimmer, but you providing information to the soldier should help them track her down if she were to appear again. You can't dwell on events of the past, for that could damage the potential future which you're striving for, and in question would make you suffer a relapse where you could do something evil,"
said Twilight.
"Yeah, I know that, but it's still frustrating knowing that she got away with it,"
I said.
"Lightning dust is bound to slip up eventually, as someone who thinks they can't be caught will make the one blunder that enables the law to uncover their wave of crime,"
said Twilight. While that wasn't the best pep talk I've gotten from her given how often I wrote her reports in my magic journal, her words were enough to make me smile, and remind me that I need to keep looking ahead. My past is behind me, and I can't allow it to consume me, so I'd say this incident was more of a hiccup than something that would have a profound effect on my life.
"We should probably head back to see Pinkie Pie, for she may know something about the Deku Scrub who is looking for that moon's tear. Considering what information she told us before proved to be helpful, she is bound to know where we can find this Deku," I said. "Are you okay?"
asked Twilight.
"All of this running around non-stop has really exhausted me. I need to lie down and sleep for a while. I know that we need to keep on going, seeing as the fate of this world is riding on our shoulders, but my body is on the verge of completely collapsing,"
I replied. My eyes were struggling to remain awake at this point, and both my arms and legs felt as though they had suddenly gained several pounds.
"Guess you were right, Twilight, about how I need sleep, for there's just no way I can go an entire 72 hours without resting. If it's okay with you, I want to go over there to that corner of West Clock Town, and curl up where no one can disturb me."
There was nothing Twilight could do to convince me otherwise, for she knew that sleep was important, and ignoring it was nothing short of absurd. I walked over to the corner in question, making sure the soldier didn't notice as he might accuse me of loitering, and then I fell asleep instantly with Twilight choosing to sleep as well as she felt just as tired as I did. Maybe I should have tried to stay awake instead of sleep, for I was about to experience that dream again. The same dream which had been plaguing me for several months, and served as the catalyst which has brought me to Termina. I once again found myself alone in a strange place, but this time I was wearing the Kokiri tunic along with having my sword and shield on my back. The large burst of flames then appeared as normal, and I braced myself as they came towards me in attempt to consume my body, thus destroying me in the process. However, it suddenly came to a stop in front of me like something was holding it back, or maybe it was someone who possessed tremendous power.
"Hey? Why has the fire stopped?"
I asked.
"Because I have willed it to be." "That voice."
"Ganondorf," I said, and sure enough the image of the Dark Lord himself appeared before me in the flames.
"Did you think that you had seen the last of me in your mind, child? Such a foolish notion coming from one as weak-minded as you, and yet I can sense great anger forming deep within your heart because of my presence. Do not attempt to try and fight me, for even though we are within your dreams, my power remains strong, thus whatever power you possess means nothing,"
said Ganondorf.
"Why are you here?"
I asked.
"I am impressed with how quickly you figured out why this world is on the verge of destruction, yet there is still much which continues to elude you. Once you have come to understand the truth, you will beg to be killed as your sanity shall shatter to pieces. Breaking your body physically grows dull, child, yet doing so to your mind is so much more entertaining. The little fairy retaining her true memories is something I had foreseen, yet this will change nothing, for you shall endure much suffering,"
replied Ganondorf.
"This rhetoric has gotten old," I said. "Your fiery nature still remains as amusing as ever,"
laughed Ganondorf.
"Okay, then explain to me why you insist on being so cryptic with everything you have to say? Is there some reason why you feel the need to give me vague hints as to what will happen? Or, is because you're afraid that I will end up surpassing you?" I asked. That wasn't my best attempt at defying him, but I knew that I was taking a big risk by saying he was afraid of me when in fact I still feared him because of what he did to me at the end of my last adventure.
Ganondorf remained quiet initially, which made me suspect he was going to end my life while drifting about in the dream realm, but his laughter echoed about before he folded his arms in front of me before continuing to laugh. That's when his eyes glowed bright yellow, which instantly froze me as though he used some kind of arcane power.
"You think that I fear you? Heh. I have faced many who had the very attitude which you possess, child, and all of them have fallen before my power. Several of them proved worthy to become my servants, so upon their deaths, I resurrected them as my obedient slaves who obey my every command,"
said Ganondorf.
"I'm not going to let you get through to me," I said. "Why struggle against the inevitable? You are destined to suffer physically and emotionally once again, yet can you survive such torment this time around? Termina is not like Hyrule, for this world was doomed from the start as opposed to the former, which was destined to be mine years later. Should you overcome the evil which exists here, I will face you once again in battle,"
said Ganondorf.
"Why do you want that?"
I asked.
"Your power intrigued me the last time we fought, and so I desire to see how much better you have become. I know that you can never defeat me as your power is a mere speck compared to mine, but perhaps you will be more entertaining than before rather than crumble within mere moments,"
replied Ganondorf. He was completely full of himself, which shows that he has quite the arrogant personality, yet was he aware that I can achieve an even greater form other than ponying up? If I do have to fight him again, I hope I can at least last long enough to find a way out, as I doubt he'd be willing to let me escape just because he decreed it. I then began sensing his power, and it was even stronger than before, which means his dark power had grown, and it became difficult for me to breathe.
"Tell me, child. The one who is your companion. This one happens to be a princess from your true world, but it appears she has hesitation in her heart. Is it because she is too weak to fulfill her intended duties, or perhaps she is afraid to face the consequences should she fail those who believe in her? Twilight would never succumb to such things, for she's much stronger than you think,"
I shouted.
"Your voice tells me that I have struck a nerve,"
said Ganondorf.
"Insulting her is really pushing it," I said. "This companion possesses a powerful magic which makes her strong, but it is merely a fledgling force compared to mine. While she believes in you, child, she does not believe in herself despite putting on a brave face. Deep down within her soul, there is a feeling of failure which she does not desire, and it torments her endlessly as it continues to eat away at her mental state. She has retained her memories for this very reason. You and your companion were fated to suffer,"
said Ganondorf.
"By your hand?"
I asked.
"Not by mine, but by another whose hatred is so strong that it desires nothing but to consume everything. Ironic that the two of you, close friends who have forged a powerful bond, shall be tested in ways that one can only view as imaginable, but this is what destiny has dealt you. Fate is a force which cannot be changed no matter how hard you may try, but should you find a miracle and defy fate, then you shall face death at my hand. Child, do not betray my expectations,"
replied Ganondorf. He then disappeared into the flames, leaving me to wonder what he meant by his parting words, but then the flames moved forward again where they consumed me, and I woke up instantly with sweat dripping down my forehead. My sudden movement caught Twilight by surprise, and she felt annoyed by what I just did at first until she realized what was wrong by looking at how I was sweating. Dawn of the second day, 48 hours remain.
"You look as though you had a bad dream,"
said Twilight.
"The same one I've experienced many times, but this time it was different because of Ganondorf," I said.
I then told Twilight everything he said to me in my dream, making sure not to leave out any details, and her expression upon me finishing was to be expected. Both of us are fated to suffer torment. While it does sound like everything is being stacked against us, Twilight insisted that we ignore his words, otherwise we'll be consumed by our own fears. She was now beginning to understand just what I went through back in Hyrule, and now it's determined to repeat itself in Termina.
"How do you ignore someone like him?"
asked Twilight.
"Through great difficulty," I replied. "Well, we need to focus on saving this world, and then finding a way to change things back to the way they were. By the way, we should find a clock so that we can check out the time, as who knows how long we've been sleeping for,"
said Twilight. We spent a few moments looking for a clock before discovering one hanging on one of the walls near the post office, and it says that it was currently 11 o'clock AM, which means we've been sleeping for at least 9 hours. I suppose it could have been worse in that we may have slept for an entire day, given how this world doesn't have alarm clocks like the human world does.
"We've got 43 hours to go," I said. "Considering how close Starlight Glimmer is, it feels like we've got plenty of time to prevent the moon from crashing, but then we can't get to her until tomorrow night when the clock tower opens up to celebrate the Carnival of Time, and the coming year. Guess all we can do is kill some time until the tower opens, yet I've got a feeling you don't have any plans to waste any time, right?"
asked Twilight.
"We still need to find that Deku scrub who wants the moon's tear, so we should speak to Pinkie Pie about that, as surely she would have an idea. Also, I think we need to pay the mayor a visit, and warn her about Starlight," I replied. "Pinkie should be in North Clock Town floating about with her balloon," said Twilight. With that, I made my way back to that part of town where she was indeed floating in the air, and when she noticed me walking nearby, she let out a yell which made me jump in the air due to how sudden it was. Since I now have the ability to shoot bubbles out of my mouth, I figured that I should pop her balloon using one of those instead of a stone to bring her down. Aiming carefully for her balloon and taking the rain into consideration, which started falling down from the clouds just a few moments ago, I fired a bubble which connected with the balloon, popping it. YAAAAHHHHHHHHHHHHH,
yelled Pinkie Pie as she dropped down before landing on the ground, and buckled her knees in the process. When she regained her composure, she turned towards me, and began to jump around repeatedly as though she were some kind of rabbit. It was actually adorable to see because it shows that despite being different in this world, Pinkie was still being Pinkie, yet I eventually had to stop her because I needed to speak with her.
Miss Fairy, I'm so glad that you came to visit Tingle once again. Are you here to purchase another one of Tingle's maps? Actually, I need more information,
I replied.
That's fine too, as I know plenty of things around town,
said Pinkie Pie.
I'm looking for a Deku scrub who has been searching for something called a moon's tear,
I said.
Oh yeah. I know which one you're talking about. He's a regular at the milk bar where he goes there every night for about an hour or two to relax after a hard day's work selling his wares to potential customers, yet he constantly harps on regarding that gem you mentioned. You may not realize this, Miss Fairy, but the moon's tear is quite the sought-after item for men as they desire to give it to their wives to make them happy. That Deku scrub has been searching a very long time for one, yet has never succeeded, which has made him so desperate, he will practically give you anything in exchange for one,
said Pinkie Pie.
Well, I have a moon's tear,
I said.
Shh! Don't say that so loud, otherwise everyone will hear you, and all of those men will come running this way,
said Pinkie Pie. She then began to dart around thinking that men were about to come out of every nook and cranny upon me saying what I did, but she was merely overreacting, as I doubt anyone heard me.
Okay. No one heard that, but you should be careful when saying things like that. Do you know where I can find the Deku scrub?
I asked.
He hangs out in South Clock Town where he owns a Deku flower that's situated near the clock tower, but when he's not there or at the milk bar, he can be seen flying off to some secret grotto hidden somewhere in the field. I should warn you, Miss Fairy, of his temperament, as he doesn't like people getting close to his property. Also, you should consider talking business talk with him, as he can understand that better than regular talk. Now, are you sure you don't need another of Tingle's maps?
Asked Pinkie Pie.
I'm good on the map, which by the way has already proven to be useful,
I replied.
Of course, as I make sure to not leave out any detail,
said Pinkie Pie.
I do have one more question for you, and it has to do with what's happening in the mayor's residence. You said to me before that she was involved in some kind of meeting, yet you never really specified as to what was happening,
I said.
Usually, things that happen in the mayor's residence are private affairs, given how she doesn't want the public to think of her as being weak, but what's been going on in there for the last couple of days is anything but that. The entire town is abuzz about what has been happening at her residence, and it involves two groups who are trying to get her support when it comes to the carnival. I don't know what exactly, as I make it a mission not to become involved with politics, but you should be able to find out for yourself, as all of the mayor's other meetings have been cancelled according to one disgruntled man,
said Pinkie Pie.
I'll go there before I find that Deku scrub,
I said.
If you change your mind about wanting one of Tingle's map, you know where to find me. Tingle, Kololimpa. Well, call again,
said Pinkie Pie. She then began to inflate another balloon before taking to the air again, but what she said about the mayor's residence made me concerned, and Twilight's expression mirrored my own. In Equestria, we've never had problems with elected officials in addition to the rulers, yet it looks like what happens here in Termina is completely different. As I walked along towards the mayor's residence, I began thinking about what must have been going on in the minds of the students and staff at Canterlot High, in addition to the Crystal Prep students, as they were dragged into this world. No doubt they were shocked, as it was something they weren't expecting, and they've experienced some magical events already. Right now, none of them are aware of what has happened, and are acting out the parts of the characters in this video game, so for the time being they are actually safe, yet who knows for how long, given that the moon above was going to crash. As I looked up at the moon, it had gotten much closer than before, and it meant that people should start taking notice of it. This made me stop walking for a few moments, which Twilight thought was odd, but then I explained that I wanted to see any possible reactions to the moon being closer. Several people walked by, but none of them paid any attention to the moon. Maybe they were either ignorant of it all and were focused on their own lives, or maybe they didn't want to be worried about the impending doom. Either way, they would soon pay attention, especially when we come down to the final hours where the moon will be practically on their doorstep. Speaking of which, I finally reached the residence of the mayor, and already I could hear the sounds of arguing coming from inside.
You can practically hear them all the way out here,
I commented.
It must be quite the heated argument if they're that loud,
said Twilight.
Maybe we shouldn't go in after all,
I suggested.
I doubt anyone in there is going to pay attention to a Deku scrub and fairy,
said Twilight.
Yeah, I suppose not,
I smiled. Opening the door and walking inside, the interior of the mayor's residence was pretty impressive, yet I couldn't say the same thing about the choice of paintings hanging up. There was one which depicted a man and a woman in a rather unusual pose, and I suspect they were the mayor and her husband during their younger days. It looked to me like they were full of themselves given how gaudy the picture was, but I ignored it as best as possible, and made my way over to a desk which must be where a receptionist works.
The receptionist isn't here. Strange, as there are plenty of various baubles on the desk. Maybe she couldn't take all that noise,
suggested Twilight.
That's a possibility,
I said. There was a note lying on the table which caught my interest, but because of my height, I was barely able to see it, and I struggled to climb up onto the desk to read it. I'm looking forward to changing back to a human, for I don't know much more I can take being like this.
At least this was written in English as opposed to Hylian, otherwise we'd need a translator. Mayor Dodur, I'm currently on lunch break, and won't be back for several hours due to all that bickering. Please don't do anything foolish, otherwise your husband may not appreciate it, and don't worry about your son. I'll ask around once again. Wow, this receptionist doesn't view the mayor as being all that good. And the same thing can be said regarding her husband,
added Twilight.
What of her son?
I asked.
There's nothing we can do about that unless we can learn more from either the mayor, or her husband, but I don't think the former will be able to say anything given she's stuck in that meeting. As for her husband, I'm not sure if she would want your help in your current form,
replied Twilight.
Guess we should just let ourselves into the meeting,
I said.
Are you sure? We might make a scene,
said Twilight.
They're probably so wrapped up in their arguing that they won't even notice us slip inside, and watch the proceedings from a safe distance. Before we do go in there, we should try and see if we can recognize anyone we know,
I suggested. I didn't need to sneak around seeing as all that noise filtered out my footsteps, and upon reaching a more fancy-looking door, I looked through the keyhole in order to see who was in there. Okay, so being this small does have one advantage, but that's all. A woman wearing glasses was sitting on a chair behind a small desk, and she looked miserable as though she had no idea what to do. The chair looked just as fancy as the door, yet no one in the room took notice of it, for they were busy arguing.
That must be the mayor of Clocktown, but I've never seen her before. That's Mayor,
said Twilight.
Seriously?
I asked.
In Equestria, she serves as the mayor of Ponyville, and even though I'm a princess who now lives just outside in a massive castle, she still holds authority over what gets done. She doesn't appear to be enjoying this meeting, yet how can you blame her when you've got two people bickering back and forth? Okay, let's see who is to her left as they are shouting loudly,
replied Twilight. Looking to our left, there was a group of 3 men with a much smaller woman among them, yet I wouldn't say she was a woman, but rather she was a kid. While I knew who it was, Twilight's reaction had more shock value.
Hey, Sweetie Belle? What is she doing in there, and looking like some kind of worker? Just like before,
I replied.
What do you mean?
Asked Twilight.
Back in Hyrule, Sweetie Belle was portrayed as a character named Muto, who was the boss of a group of carpenters who were hired to transform Kakariko Village from a small village, and into a large city. After that, they all left the village where they traveled to Gerudo Valley, and settled there, which was the last I saw her. I'm slightly surprised that she is reprising the same character here as she did there, but it looks like she isn't a carpenter this time,
I replied.
I wonder what Rarity would say to this,
said Twilight.
She'd throw a hissy fit if she saw her sister wearing such drab clothes,
I said.
That sounds just like her. I'm sure we'll eventually run into her wherever she is in Termina. Okay, let's look at the other person arguing,
said Twilight. Turning and looking to our right, she suddenly began to flutter around like crazy, all because of who was arguing with Sweetie Belle.
My brother? My brother's in there. Sunset, we need to get in there, and talk to Shining Armor as surely he can help us out.
Sure enough, it was her brother, but was this the one from Equestria, or from the human world? Twilight's human counterpart did tell us that her brother was a former alumnus for Crystal Prep, so could that be him in there?
I don't think he'll listen,
I sighed.
Why not?
Asked Twilight.
Even though that is your brother, at the same time it's not him because he is portraying someone else in Termina. He won't recognize you no matter how much you try and plead with him, so we can't expect him to help despite you wanting that. Then again, he might be the Shining Armor from the human world who is also the sister of your human counterpart,
I replied. At first, Twilight scolded me for not wanting to help her brother, and for suggesting that wasn't the shining armor she knew, so I decided to explain what he was like during my adventures in Hyrule. Shining Armor was the captain of the Royal Guards who protected Twilight when she was Zelda, yet Ganondorf almost killed him during his invasion of the castle, and he would reappear years later as a broken man who kept to himself because he felt that he failed in his duties. It looks like he is a captain once again like he was before, but I don't think he'll be facing any kind of danger.
My brother did recover, right?
I asked.
I was able to get him to see things in a positive way,
I replied.
You're really getting a handle on knowing how to be a good friend,
smiled Twilight. With that little explanation out of the way, I opened the door to the actual office of the mayor, and as I suspected, no one was paying attention because of how loud it was. Upon sneaking inside, I hid behind a large plant located in a corner before Twilight and I began listening in on what they were arguing about.
Most of the townsfolk already have taken shelter without waiting for the mayor's orders. The only ones left are public servants and committee members. Ms. Mayor and Carnival Committee members, please order those who remain to evacuate. We don't know much time remains before the moon is expected to crash into Clock Town, so the sooner everyone has evacuated from town, the sooner we can arrange for transportation to Romani Ranch,
said Shining Armor.
Yes, that is a valid option,
said Mayor Mare.
The ranch should be an ideal location to weather out the oncoming storm, for it's obvious that Clock Town won't survive. Then again, I can't say for certain if relocating there will work as the impact could destroy all of Termina. Still, we do need to flee otherwise the casualties could be insurmountable. Mrs. Mayor, give the order to evacuate as soon as possible,
said Shining Armor. From what I could hear, despite arguing coming from minor characters on both sides, Shining Armor wants to ensure the safety of the people above everything else. Twilight commented that she felt proud knowing her brother even in this world was putting other people's lives ahead of his own, but what will Sweetie Belle say in return? I'm not sure if she agrees completely with what he said, or she refuses to believe anything he has to say.
Alright. I've heard your side, Vissen, so now I turn things to you, Muto,
said Mayor Mare.
You cowards! Do you actually believe the moon will fall? Throughout my entire life, I've never heard anything so utterly foolishness like the moon is being pulled down towards us by some kind of powerful force. The confused townsfolk simply caused a panic by believing this ridiculous, groundless theory. The soldiers couldn't prevent the panic, but outside the town walls is where the danger is. Those monsters didn't suddenly come out of the woodwork within the last few days, but rather they've been out there for years, and it's only just now that they are beginning to stir because of the fear being exuded. You soldiers need to focus on dealing with those beasts, and making sure none of them can get into town, otherwise people could get hurt,
said Sweetie Belle.
The soldiers have been working hard to keep our citizens safe,
said Mayor Mare.
But because of this stupid moon talk, they've been slacking off by focusing on that instead of their regular duties. Did you all hear about the old lady from the bomb shop who was robbed last night? The soldiers should have easily caught the thief before she could escape, but they were focused on dealing with an imaginary problem instead. If this continues to be an issue, then maybe we could do with some new soldiers who actually know what they're doing. In any case, back to the important matter at hand. You want answers? The answer is that the carnival should not be cancelled. Isn't that right, Mrs. Mayor?
Asked Sweetie Belle. I didn't need any hint regarding how she thinks, for it was pretty obvious to me as soon as she began talking. The Carnival Committee are more concerned with the carnival itself instead of the people, but I'm sure there is a much deeper meaning here. Twilight couldn't believe how Sweetie Belle was acting given how sweet and innocent she is in Equestria, yet I reminded her that she's different in Termina compared to the one she happens to know. Still, it looks as though the militia are in the right, but that could quickly change depending on what gets said next.
Now Muto, there is no need to insult the soldiers like that. While that thief did end up escaping, she was far more experienced than originally suspected. Thanks to important eyewitnesses, the thief shall be captured without fail when she returns to Clock Town, which is inevitable,
said Mayor Mare.
I did step out of line a little, but I still by what I said about them not focusing on the monsters,
said Sweetie Belle.
This shall be taken into consideration, so now you may speak again, Vissen,
said Mayor Mare.
Are you serious, Muto? First of all, my soldiers have proven themselves time and again that we're doing our job, considering that no monsters have ever managed to enter Clock Town, and despite last night, our track record remains impeccable,
said Shining Armor. He was beginning to get rather testy, which could end up getting a lot worse unless he calms down, but then Sweetie Belle isn't likely to allow him the chance to cool off.
Also, it seems that giant chunk of rock above us hasn't caught your eye. At this time every year, we are overrun by tourists. So why is the town empty? It's because the people are afraid of what is falling above us, and they wish to preserve their own lives as opposed to being here. Clearly, it's your job to ensure the carnival's operation, but that's if people are here for it. Since there aren't any people around, there is no point in having the carnival as it would just be a waste of time. Don't drag the merchants and soldiers into this. Now, listen. Let's try to calm down before things spiral out of control. I know how you feel about Muto's way of thinking, but there is no need to resort to harsh rhetoric, and this applies with you as well, Muto. This is supposed to be a peaceful meeting where we must figure out an ideal solution to the problem at hand, yet shouting back and forth isn't the way to do things,
said Mayor. Just looking at the mayor made me feel really sorry for her because she is stuck in between two people who clearly don't understand what being mature is all about. She's taking their respective insults, and trying so hard to keep things civil, but it looks as though she has lost complete control. No. She never had control from the start, as it was beyond her means the moment things began. I remember back when I was Princess Celestia's student in Equestria, there were incidents similar to this, yet she was able to bring about peaceful resolutions without it getting to the point where ponies would consider attacking each other. Mayor doesn't deserve to be caught in such a mess, yet I don't think there's anything I can do to help her out.
If the soldiers wish to run, then run, listen. We councilmen will stick to tradition. This carnival will be a success. I've never heard of a defense unit abandoning its town under any circumstances. Even though there aren't as many people this year compared with previous years, we can still put on the carnival without the need to cancel anything just because the moon is falling. You and your soldiers should be protecting the people, and not wanting to flee with your tails between your legs. Monsieur Aroma would surely say the same thing, wouldn't he, Mayor Dotour?
Asked Sweetie Belle.
Let's not bring my husband into this,
replied Mayor.
Why?
Asked Sweetie Belle.
Monsieur Aroma doesn't need to get herself in this meeting, Muto,
replied Shining Armor.
You're just afraid that he will agree with what I'm saying, aren't you? I can read you like a book, listen, for you're just so predictable that it just makes me laugh,
said Sweetie Belle.
Such a blatant lie coming from you,
said Shining Armor.
Anyway, it's obvious what we need to do in order to resolve this issue, and that is to not cancel the carnival,
said Sweetie Belle.
No, we must evacuate the town before the moon destroys us all,
said Shining Armor.
On with the carnival,
shouted Sweetie Belle.
All must take refuge,
shouted Shining Armor.
On with the carnival,
shouted Sweetie Belle.
All must take refuge,
shouted Shining Armor. It was around this time where it became apparent that things were just going to continue on with the two of them repeating the same thing over and over until Mayor agrees with one of them, and I personally couldn't take the arguing any longer, so Twilight and I slipped out of the office without being noticed, and soon we were outside again where the arguing could still be heard.
That was one of the worst experiences I've ever seen,
I moaned.
Sweetie Belle and my brother are at such odds with each other, that they refuse to listen to what the other has to say. They are just yelling in order to get their voices heard, and to earn a sympathetic ear with Mayor, who must be ready to lose what little she has of her sanity. I would suggest we go back, and show them the meaning of friendship, but my skills as the Princess of Friendship can't work out miracles,
said Twilight.
Maybe they need to see something that can convince them to come up with a solution,
I suggested.
I think the mayor is the one who needs to end that meeting,
said Twilight.
How? She looks completely overwhelmed,
I said.
They all just need to see something wonderful that's a reflection of the strongest emotion out there. Love. If Princess Cadance were here, she would have used her powers, and calmed them all down instantly. They would still need to resolve that problem which keeps them stuck in that office, but they would be much more level-headed rather than acting like savages. This actually has me wanting to discuss something important with you,
said Twilight.
What is it?
I asked.
Clock Town seems to be filled with all kinds of problems given how people have been suffering because of Starlight Glimmer, so if we could solve these problems that plague everyone, we'd be doing them a terrific service. We'd also feel good about ourselves for taking the time to help them. Now I know it wouldn't be easy given how we don't have much time before the moon falls, and we most likely haven't seen everyone in town and beyond who have issues, so we would be at a disadvantage at first,
replied Twilight. You've got to love how determined she is to resolve issues with the power of friendship, but then that has been the kind of person Twilight is. She is always willing to lend a hand, or hoof in her case, and help anyone who needs it. I've actually learned a lot from our reports we sent back and forth with one another, yet I would be a novice compared with her expertise, which means she would be in the lead. If only those bombers had allowed me to join them, we could have done things in their name, and help those in need, which in turn would make their cause even more of an attraction for other kids who aspire to aiding those who need help. But, they refused to let me join, all because I'm trapped as a Deku scrub due to this curse, and regaining the ocarina is my only means of changing back to normal. Speaking of Deku scrubs, I think it's high time we pay that one who wants the moon's tear a visit, so I began to head back towards South Clock Town, yet I would soon discover a small snag. Pinkie Pie never said where the Deku flower was, which belongs to the Deku in question. What began as a simple task has now become more difficult.
We could be spending hours trying to find it,
I moaned.
This definitely wasn't one of Pinkie's better moments,
moaned Twilight.
How much time do we have left?
I asked.
That meeting took up quite a lot of time, and judging from the change in colors all around us due to the setting sun, I'd say we have about 36 hours left. It's a really scary thought, as time just seems to be ticking away even though it doesn't feel that way,
replied Twilight. Night of the second day, 36 hours remain.
Only 36 hours left? Seeing as we have to wait until midnight tomorrow before we can access the clock tower, we've essentially got 30 hours to find that Deku scrub, and see what we can get by giving him the moon's tear,
I said. When I said that things were about to become more difficult, I assumed that there would be at least several dozen of those Deku flowers, but in reality there was only one which stood out quite easily. It's just that we didn't bother to look directly in front of the clock tower, so we wasted several hours going back and forth throughout the area.
I can't believe we couldn't see this flower right by the clock tower. And we wasted a couple of hours,
added Twilight. Pinkie did say where the flower was located, which I now remember, so I smacked myself in the forehead as a result of my blunder.
Well, we've found the Deku flower, so where is the Deku scrub?
I asked.
I'm not sure where he could be given how we haven't seen any of them, but then they probably prefer to keep out of sight given how they are treated by most people. I wonder if we can just use this flower without him knowing about it. Of course, it won't be until tomorrow night since we still have time,
replied Twilight.
Considering how much running around I've done on my feet, that does seem like a fair trade,
I said. No sooner did I say that and attempted to walk forward towards the flower, a voice came out of nowhere, and didn't sound appreciative of what I was about to do.
Wait. Hang on.
I was thinking he was hiding inside the flower, and popped his head out, but then I heard what sounded like helicopter blades, only not as loud and obnoxious, so looking upwards the sky, an unusual looking Deku scrub was flying towards us. He was carrying a few bags with him which must be wares, so this has to be one of those business scrubs like those in Ganondorf's castle. It felt weird just then that I remembered such names given that I haven't played Ocarina of Time ever since changing things back to normal, but then I did say to Rainbow Dash not to let me near it because of a premonition of disaster, to which she laughed and shrugged her shoulders as though I made it up. I guess she realized she was wrong when the tornado brought us here, but I'm not going to look down on her because of it. The business scrub was certainly taking his sweet time getting down here, but when he finally landed, he somehow made his wares disappear, and put on a small hat before addressing me.
This is my private property. Don't try using it when I'm not around. You own this flower?
I asked.
I have a deed which claims that this spot belongs to me. My assumption was you were using it because you found it first, and I was going to use it just for one simple thing,
I said.
If you had gone and carried out such a plan, I would have called the soldiers, and have you arrested for using private property. Now, I can tell that you're just a young little Deku, so I'll go easy on you, and not make this go any further. Next time however, I won't hesitate to call them, so be sure to remember that for the future. Anyway, today has been a very good day for me when it comes to doing my business. How so?
I asked.
I've already sold out of my wares, and the carnival hasn't even begun. I'm thinking of closing up shop so I can buy a gift for my wife and return to her in my village. I've heard that a stone called the Moon's Tear shines brighter than any other in the land. If you've got one, I'd really like to get it from you. My wife would love it. And what would you do for me if I told you that I had one?
I asked.
If you give it to me, I'll give you my spot here. Deku flower included. You're a Deku scrub, so you know just how convenient a Deku flower can be. If you don't hurry, I'll give it to another Deku scrub. The early scrub gets the nut. Okay, I'll sweeten the deal for you by explaining how special my flower is. If you haven't already noticed by now, this flower is yellow in color compared to the pink color of most flowers. Jumping into this Deku flower will enable you to launch even higher than ever before, and you'll be able to glide along for a greater period of time. In fact, you could probably reach the upper entrance of the clock tower using this Deku flower alone.
Hearing him say this was just what I wanted to hear, as now we've got the means to get up there, and confront Starlight Glimmer once and for all. Judging from the expression on his face, he really wants the moon's tear badly, and seeing the sweat dripping down his brow does creep me out, but at least this is going to be an easy transaction provided that no one decided to rob me while I was sleeping some time ago. The business scrub then reached forward with his hands, and I gave him a cold stare which prompted me to back off.
Sorry about that, but I'm really hoping that you have a moon's tear, and aren't trying to tease me because of that whole calling the soldier business. Do you have one? Would this be it?
I asked. Reaching into one of my pockets, I pulled it out where the business scrub's eyes enlarged so much, they were about to burst.
Ah! That stone. You must hand it over to me. In exchange, I'll give you my spot here. Deku flower included. Yes.
This was an offer which I couldn't refuse, as there was essentially no other means of getting up there, so I placed the moon's tear into his outstretched hands again, where he immediately jumped for joy.
Yes. This is definitely a genuine moon's tear if I ever saw one. Since you have given me your item, allow me to give you this in return, thus completing our deal.
He then handed over what looked to be some kind of fancy paper, yet it had writing on it which looked official.
With this land title deed, the Deku flower legally belongs to you, and no other Deku scrub can take it away from you. You really helped me out. Now I have the perfect souvenir for my wife. She hasn't set eyes on a jewel or strange, sparkling stone like this in a very long time. I'm glad to have done this good deed, I said. Oh yes. I remember seeing a large heart-shaped object on top of the ledge in front of the tower entrance, so you can have it as well as part of the deal. I don't know who put it up there to begin with, but I've no need for such a thing, and I have a hunch that you will find it most lucrative. One last thing. The title deed for this spot should be in high demand among Deku scrubs, but then you probably already know that, so there's no need for any sort of reminder. If you don't need it anymore, you can always sell it. Well, I'll leave things in your capable hands, for I have a wonderful wife who is going to be extremely happy.
The business scrub then ducked down into the Deku flower for a few seconds before popping back out, and taking to the air holding his bags of merchandise. As soon as he left town by flying over a wall, I was left with a flower which I now owned because of having a deed for it.
I feel like I've suddenly become a duchess, I said. It is strange that he was willing to give you the deed to the flower in exchange for a rock that fell from the eyes of the moon, said Twilight. While he did act really weird when he reached out initially, I can overlook that given we've got our means to get to Starlight now. All we have to do now is wait for midnight tomorrow night, and we can bring this to an end.
I said.
Our adventure will be over already?
Asked Twilight.
It does sound it, but I've got a feeling something will go wrong, I replied. What makes you say that?
Asked Twilight.
Everything so far has been somewhat easy, and for that I haven't been tested yet, which would involve me being beaten to within an inch of my life, I replied.
Yes, I did just say that to Twilight, and I knew she was going to ask me to elaborate on it due to being shocked. I told her that during my adventures in Hyrule, I sustained lots of injuries at the hands of powerful monsters where I hurt my back, suffered cuts all over my body, blood seeping forth with no means of stopping it, and even having a sword go right through me at one time. If not for the fairies who revived whenever I was killed in battle, I wouldn't be alive right now. Twilight then asked me how many times I've died, given this was the first time she had been told about it. I answered by saying at least 3 or 4 times, but I've lost count given that my life left my body at those precise moments.
Is this going to happen here in Termina?
Asked Twilight.
Guaranteed, I replied. Then you need to get your hands on some fairies as soon as possible, said Twilight. Unfortunately, the shops around here don't take too kindly to Deku scrubs according to you, so the chances of me getting a fairy is next to none. Besides, you need a bottle in order to carry one, and I haven't got any on hand, which further compounds things. Besides, I don't want to fight Starlight Shimmer, for I'd rather avoid resorting to fighting if a more peaceful solution can be found.
I said.
So what do you want to do now?
Asked Twilight.
There's not much else given we can't enter the tower until tomorrow, I replied. We could try to find some more rupees and deposit them at the bank, suggested Twilight. Because those soldiers won't allow us to leave town, we might not find much other than smashing the occasional jar, and cutting down bushes using my spinning attack, which will give us a rupee or 2, I said. How about sleep again?
Asked Twilight.
Yeah, we can do that, and if I sleep inside of the Deku flower, no one is bound to bother me as I'll be safe and secure,
I replied. The thought of sleeping inside of a flower did feel weird to me at first, but it should be something I'll quickly get used to. Twilight said she didn't mind where we sleep so long as we don't oversleep, and end up missing our chance as we'll only have the one. Diving into the flower without another thought, I slowly drifted off by closing my eyes, and once again that dream crept into my subconscious where once again I was consumed by flames. Was this some kind of premonition of things to come? Or maybe there was some other kind of meaning. Eventually, I began to dream about hanging out with my friends, and this remained consistent throughout the duration of my sleep. Until I woke up hours later due to an earthquake?
Wah!
Before I knew what was happening, I popped from the Deku flower, and landed on my rear a short distance away.
What the? Why is the ground shaking?
Night of the final day, 12 hours remain.
Sunset Shimmer?
Began Twilight.
Yeah.
I asked.
You might want to look up at the moon,
replied Twilight. I did what she suggested, and my mouth dropped down in sheer horror, for the moon had gotten a whole lot bigger since the other day. In fact, you could almost see inside of its nose, which was both creepy and disgusting.
That tremor we just felt wasn't an earthquake, but rather it's coming from the moon as it draws closer to Clock Town, and I think this has been a trend occurring these last 12 hours or so. Judging from the color of the sky, we've slept through what was left of the second night, and throughout the entirety of the final day. So we have about 12 hours left?
I asked.
This is cutting it awfully close,
replied Twilight.
On the bright side, although that's putting it mildly when you consider what's above us, I'm fully rested, which means I can go on for at least 24 hours or so,
I said.
You're going to need your A-game, Sunset Shimmer, for you know as well as I do that Starlight is waiting for us. We have to be extremely cautious, as who knows how much her power has grown since changing you into a Deku scrub,
said Twilight. If there's anything that can be said about what Starlight is going through, it's that I've been there before when I strive to gain as much power as possible. The thing about power is that most end up losing control, and become nothing more than enraged beasts who are beyond saving as their minds are lost. Those who do manage to gain control become like Ganondorf. Or perhaps similar to him, yet different at the same time. You would need to have incredible willpower to be able to not lose yourself, and that is a seldom seen gift. For Starlight, she may have gained control, or she may have lost all senses of self, so if the latter happens to be the case, all I can do is offer pity before stopping her from bringing down the moon. Me? I won't succumb to any temptations, as I've reformed from how I used to be, and Twilight of course would never become corrupted, as she is one of the purest people I've ever known in my life despite having some anxiety issues. Granted, her human counterpart succumbed to darkness, but not in an evil manner, for it was knowledge, and being pressured that consumed her. Even though waiting here for midnight for the tower to open was a good course of action, I decided to see if anyone was still around given how close the moon was. As I walked around with Twilight floating along by my side, apart from experiencing the occasional tremor as the moon inched ever closer, Clock Town was mostly deserted, yet it looked as though some people were still here for reasons of their own. Pinkie Pie was still floating in the air via her balloon, and I think she wasn't concerned with the moon given how she is practically in her own little world. The bombers were on patrol, which shows how dedicated they were, but maybe they should leave before things get too dangerous. The soldiers were still guarding the entrances to town along with stopping me from leaving due to being a child, but when I came back to South Clock Town after spending an hour looking around for anyone still here, I could hear the grumblings of Sweetie Belle, who was standing alone staring at the tower.
Cowards! All of you! Not a one of you stayed. You all said that you would stick this out no matter what, but you ended up running away all because the moon falling was too much. Bah! My apprentice will be disgusted with all of you. At least he decided to stay because he's not going to let something like this stop him. Humph! If you reckon that you'll be forgiven for fleeing by the time you come back, think again. The rest of you people have no backbones, and fled just like those worthless cowards. I'll have a fine carnival without you,
said Sweetie Belle.
Who knew that she had quite the mean streak when she gets mad,
said Twilight.
Do you think we should talk to her?
I asked.
It might make her feel better,
replied Twilight.
It's the eve of the carnival, and I can't even get to the clock tower stairway entrance. This stinks worse than Dodongo breath. Humph! This had better be the last of the surprises,
shouted Sweetie Belle. She then noticed me walking up towards her, and was taken aback by the fact that I was still hanging around town.
Hey, Deku kid! You wait in for us to finish the bridge from the festival tower to the clock tower entrance up there. Is that what that thing is?
I asked.
Every year, a bridge gets built which connects from the ground to the entrance to the tower, for that's the only way people can get up there in order to pray for a good harvest to come. If you planned on going up there yourself, then you're out of luck, I'm afraid. Sorry. My apprentices panicked and ran away. The cowards. They should have stayed and gotten this bridge finished rather than fleeing to save their own skins, but then it shows that I picked a sorry bunch given they cracked under pressure. This is all we get for a festival tower. It's not quite tall enough, is it? Sheesh.
Replied Sweetie Belle.
So what do you plan on doing?
I asked.
I intend on celebrating the carnival even if most of the town have abandoned it,
replied Sweetie Belle.
Why haven't those soldiers left?
I asked.
They wanted to flee along with the townsfolk, but they can't because Mayor Dotur never gave them the order to flee. You see kid, we had a meeting which was to decide what course of action we were going to take regarding the current situation, yet we couldn't come up with a solution which resulted in nothing being done. I suppose if we had been more civil about it rather than shouting endlessly, something could have been done. This carnival has been nothing but problematic from day one, and the results of our labors speak for themselves. Even if we went to the top of the festival tower, we wouldn't be able to get up to the clock tower entrance. When the tower opens at midnight, it raises up before opening, but as it currently stands, that bridge isn't going to do us anything.
Replied Sweetie Belle.
Can't you finish building it yourself?
I asked.
One person isn't enough kid, and there isn't much time left anyway. I apologize for all this. I wish I could scare that moon away. Why don't you try to flee kid, for you have a reason to flee whereas I've got to stay here to hold my ground.
Replied Sweetie Belle. Even though escaping sounded like a good idea, I knew that wasn't an option as I had to get up there and face Starlight Glimmer. I didn't mention any of that to her, and instead said that I couldn't leave town because the soldiers won't let me due to being a kid.
Then it looks like we're both stuck here then kid. Enjoy the carnival for as long as you can even though it should be better than this.
I decided to leave Sweetie Belle alone as her constant bouts of anger started to get worse. Walking back over to where the Deku flower was, I looked up at the moon again where it had gotten even closer, and the tremors were getting more and more prominent.
Things have gotten out of control, I said. It doesn't matter how far away people have gotten from Clock Town, for the impact of the crash will destroy all of Termina. There is no place that is safe, so if we can't stop Starlight from carrying out her insane intentions, this world is as good as gone.
Said Twilight.
We should use the Deku flower, and get up to that platform,
I suggested.
You can even pick up that heart-shaped object the Deku scrub said was there, for no one else will,
said Twilight. Diving into the flower before launching myself from it, I gained even greater height than ever, and I used this increased height to easily land on the ledge in question which housed a piece of heart. I remember collecting these back in Hyrule, and to see one of these again made me happy, for these will let me survive longer than usual. Upon picking it up, I felt the warm feeling which occurred when I picked them up before. At that exact moment, bells suddenly ran out which must have signified that midnight had finally come. At first, fireworks began to shoot upwards towards the sky indicating the beginning of the Carnival of Time. Then, the entire tower began to rise up which made me fall onto my rear as I wasn't expecting such a sudden shift, but when I got back onto my feet, a giant handle dropped down which raised up a massive platform. This must be what the people get onto in order to pray for the coming year according to what Pinkie Pie said to me, but before I could think about her words further, steps began to appear as panels in front of me dropped down.
That must be the way up, I said. Sunset Shimmer. Now is the time to take on Starlight Glimmer,
said Twilight.
You don't have to tell me twice, I said.
Running up the stairs as fast as possible, I soon reached the platform where a number of green-colored jars were located around the edge, but my focus was on who was floating about in front of me. Starlight Glimmer at first was ignoring me as she was fixated on the moon, but she eventually turned to face me probably due to sensing me being in the area. The dark aura coming from her was so strong that it felt like being pulled down by an incredible force of weight, yet I resisted this for I've come so far, and succumbing just isn't an option.
I'm surprised to see you again, said Starlight Glimmer. Despite turning me into a Deku scrub which has cost me nothing but problems, at the same time I've learned to adapt to this new form. In that sense, I have you to thank for this, but don't get too used to the idea that I am complimenting you. Far from it. You have caused so much pain and suffering which you think of as just having fun, so now you must pay for what you've done,
I said.
Quite the bold words, but you don't have what it takes to defeat me. Even though you've gotten a little better since I last saw you, and I suppose I've the Great Fairy to thank for that, it won't be much of a factor in the end. I should have finished her off after shattering her body into pieces, yet instead my focus led me elsewhere, and you were able to benefit from her assistance,"
said Starlight Glimmer.
"Tattle." "Hey?"
asked Twilight. I had completely forgotten that Spike was also here, for I had been focused on Starlight the entire time. Spike had been floating by her side, yet he isn't aware of who she really is, and that actually goes double for him as well. It felt strange because he was there by my side throughout my last adventure, but now this is no longer the case as he chooses to side with her.
"Tattle. I've been worried about you ever since you got left behind back in that cave,"
said Spike.
"Spike! Get away from her before it's too late!"
shouted Twilight.
"Are you okay, Tattle? Why did you call me by such a simplistic name as that? You know my name is Tail, or did you suffer some kind of memory loss due to coming into contact with that girl you're standing next to? Skull Kid, we shouldn't have abandoned her like that as now she has no idea who either or us are,"
said Spike. Starlight said nothing as though she didn't care at all, and this made Spike rather annoyed.
"Hello? Did you hear what I just said?" "I heard you, but I don't care,"
replied Starlight Glimmer.
"What? That's my sister down there, and your friend who has stuck with you through thick and thin along with myself. How can you say that you don't care when she did everything for you even though many things you've done are questionable? We need to get her away from that kid before she ends up getting even worse, and I wouldn't even begin to know what to do if that were to happen,"
said Spike.
"She made her choice, Tail, and there's nothing that can be done about it. She was far too weak to even understand what I desire, and now I stand on the cusp of success as everything is in place. Those who are weak must be destroyed as they cannot fathom what will happen when the moon comes crashing down. The strong are just as useless as their way of thinking is flawed to no end. No, nothing can be allowed to survive,"
said Starlight Glimmer.
"Are you serious?"
I asked.
"If I wasn't, the moon wouldn't be falling now, would it?"
asked Starlight Glimmer. Either she had completely lost her mind due to the power of the mask, or she was dead serious about destroying Termina, and I personally think the former is what has happened. Now I need to figure out how to get that mask away from her, but how am I supposed to fly up there without the means of a Deku flower? While I was trying to come up with a plan, Spike looked as though he had something to say, yet was holding back perhaps out of fear of betraying Starlight. If this were Equestria, Spike would never fight by her side, but because this is Termina where everyone now exists with different lives, he is struggling to do the right thing even though it would mean betraying a valuable friendship.
"Starlight Glimmer!"
shouted Twilight.
"Are you calling me by that name again, Tattle? What is up with you all of a sudden? You've always been wanting to have fun even though it did mean at the expense of others sometimes, but ever since we ran into that girl in the woods, everything has changed completely. It's like you're a different person now, and I won't tolerate it. Even though that name does sound rather dashing, and I do aim on using it with what little time we have left, I am the Skull Kid who shall bring Termina to its knees,"
said Starlight Glimmer.
"The reason I've changed is something you'll never understand,"
said Twilight.
"Is that so? You think I'm some kind of idiot? Well, I'll make sure that you and your new friend will be destroyed first before the end comes. Think of it as a little gift from me as I doubt seeing everything consumed in flames will be an ideal final image,"
said Starlight Glimmer.
"Then is there nothing that can convince you to stop?"
asked Twilight.
"Why would I stop this now? Besides, the chances of stopping the moon from falling are slim to none, so I suggest that you enjoy these last hours before it all ends. Or until I destroy you both before the end comes,"
replied Starlight Glimmer. It was at this point where Spike suddenly darted out in front of her, and she was surprised that he went and did that, but then her voice changed to one of anger as though she didn't like his action.
"Tail? What are you doing? Don't tell me you're going to say what I think you'll say." "Swamp? Mountain? Ocean? Canyon? Hurry! The four who are there. Bring them here,"
replied Spike. His words made no sense at all, but then there is nothing about this world which makes sense to me given how I was thrown into it without any prior knowledge. What did he mean by the four? As I tried to figure out what Spike had said, the reaction from Starlight Glimmer made it obvious that she wasn't very happy about him saying that. Is it possible Spike knows how to prevent the moon from crashing? If so, then why did he keep silent until now? He could have said something back when we first met in the woods, or he could have left Starlight and tell me what I needed to know. While I'll applaud him for confessing, it's sadly a little too late given that there was less than 6 hours to go.
Don't speak out of line,
shouted Starlight Glimmer as she smacked Spike really hard, which caused him to get pushed aside.
Stupid fairy.
Spike! exclaimed Twilight.
That was uncalled for,
I shouted.
He shouldn't have gone and said that, so he had to be punished for it,
said Starlight Glimmer.
I was willing to believe you could be reformed, but after seeing you do something as deplorable as that, you're too far gone to be saved. Spike and I in this world were your friend because you had no one, and we all bonded instantly, yet by smacking him like you did, you've pretty much sullied our friendship,
said Twilight.
Whatever. Even if they were to come now, they wouldn't be able to handle me,
laughed Starlight Glimmer.
What do you mean?
I asked.
Just look above you, and you should understand what I mean. If not, then it shows how narrow-minded you really are, so allow me to explain it so that you can figure it out. If it's something that can be stopped, then go ahead and try to stop it,
replied Starlight Glimmer. The blank expression on my face told her that I still didn't follow what she was saying, and she slapped her head in confusion.
Well, I guess in the end you just lacked common sense, seeing as you couldn't figure out something so simple, but I'll give you one last bit of merriment before it all ends. Even though we still have just over 5 hours left before the moon crashes, why not speed things up a notch, and make it crash within the next 5 minutes? That way, there's no reason for dragging this out any more than it already has. What? Surely you don't have that kind of power,
I said.
I could have ended things a whole lot sooner had the urge really been strong enough, but I figured on letting everyone below suffer for as long as possible, or until I got bored. Guess the latter option ended up winning, for I'm bored speaking with you. Once I use my powers to bring the moon down even faster, I'll deal with you and Tattle, so don't do anything until I'm ready,
said Starlight Glimmer. She then raised her hands up above her head, and unleashed a powerful burst of magic which began to swirl about the moon. At first nothing happened, which made me think this was nothing but a bluff, but then the moon started to fall faster than ever before. I guess she really was serious, for now what was 5 hours left to impact had been reduced to 5 minutes.
Things just got a lot worse, I sighed. She's really desperate to bring about an end to Termina,
said Twilight.
With only 5 minutes left before the moon crashes, we don't have many options available, I said. We do have one,
began Twilight.
And that would be?
I asked.
Starlight is so consumed with bringing the moon down, she is completely ignoring us, which means you can get that ocarina back. If it's as powerful as you say it is, then maybe we can play some kind of song that will bring about an end to all of this,
replied Twilight.
But, how am I supposed to get it when she's up there?
I asked.
Why not use those bubbles of yours, and knock the instrument out of her hand? It most likely won't break, as when I saw her practicing with it earlier, she did drop it a few times, and it suffered no damage at all. I'd say make it count, Sunset Shimmer, for you only have one shot at this,
replied Twilight. First off, I slapped myself in the forehead for not realizing that I could use my bubbles from a distance. Second, I wish she hadn't said that, as now I've got even more pressure than ever before. If this fails, Starlight will figure out what I'm doing, and I'll never get the Ocarina of Time back. Aiming as carefully as possible without making her aware of my actions, I produced a bubble in my mouth, and fired it at her when she suddenly turned around after hearing some kind of whizzing sound. Luckily for me, Starlight couldn't react fast enough, and dropped the ocarina where it landed on the ground in front of me with a soft thud. Without worrying about my own safety, I ran over to pick it up, and upon laying my hands onto it, I began to envision some kind of dream which didn't make much sense, for this was a memory that I don't recall ever having. Unless this was something from the memory of the one that I'm portraying. In this dream, I stood before a young girl who I didn't recognize at first, but then her clothes made me remember that this was the person Twilight portrayed. This must be the real Princess Zelda, and the memory I'm currently experiencing must have been when the hero returned to the past in order to live out his life. According to the Hyrule Historia, after he returned to the past, the hero was able to warn the king of Ganondorf's treachery, and was subsequently arrested before he could succeed in getting his vile hands on the golden power. I guess he decided to stick around Hyrule Castle for a period of time, yet it appears that he is about to go on a journey. Or rather I should say me, because I'm portraying the hero, whose name currently escapes me even though I've heard it before, which means this is apparently what I did, where it leads into where I started in the forest.
You are already leaving this land of Hyrule, aren't you?
Asked Zelda.
I believe so,
I replied.
Even though it was only a short time, I feel like I've known you forever. I am not sure why I feel this way, but it is of no real consequence, for the time that we have shared are ones that I shall cherish forever. I believe in my heart that a day will come when I shall meet you again. Until that day comes, please take this. You should recognize this instrument, for you used it during your adventures, and I feel you are far better at keeping it safe rather than it remaining here in the castle,"
said Zelda.
"Why give me the Ocarina of Time?"
I asked.
"Because destiny has revealed to me in a dream that it will become of immense value as you go on your personal journey. There is no need for you to explain what this journey of yours consists of, for it is not my place to know. However, please allow me to say this, otherwise I may never have another opportunity to do so. I am praying that your journey be a safe one, because you have been known to wander into situations where you have fought for your very life, and I fear that you may end up falling into a situation which is much worse than anything that Hyrule has. If something should happen to you, remember this song,"
replied Zelda.
"What kind of song?"
I asked.
"It was needed to open the door of time, which is where the Master Sword had been located, but now there is no longer any need to wield the Divine Blade. Evil no longer exists in Hyrule, as Ganondorf is now awaiting his execution, which should happen within the next year or two, but now I reveal to you a secret about this melody, which has been a closely guarded secret to the royal family of Hyrule. This melody has the power to control time itself, so if you find yourself needing more time, the Song of Time will allow you to acquire what you need. I know that you will not abuse such an ability, but instead you will use it to make the worlds you visit better than they currently are,"
replied Zelda. Before handing over the Ocarina of Time to me, she then played a song which I remember from before, and upon playing it twice in order to show me how it was meant to be played, she gave it to me. Even though it had been a while since I last played it, I hadn't forgotten how to play the ocarina, and I flawlessly played the same notes that she did. Now this memory in my dream makes sense, for I remember the Song of Time. If what Zelda says is true, this song will allow me to manipulate time itself to my whim, and I may just have the solution to the current crisis happening in Termina. Of course, it all depends on what I do next once I come out of this dream, and back into reality. Upon learning the Song of Time, I climbed onto Epona, who was standing by my side, and she trotted off at a slow pace, perhaps to emphasize that I was going on a long journey. As I was leaving, Zelda said one last thing which really struck home with regards to what I need to do.
"The Goddess of Time is protecting you. If you play the Song of Time, she will aid you." "Sunset Shimmer?"
asked Twilight.
"Hey,"
I asked.
"What happened to you just now? You suddenly began daydreaming, and it during such a critical time,"
replied Twilight.
"It was a memory of the one who I am portraying experienced before he left Hyrule to begin a personal journey. Princess Zelda, who you portrayed, gave the ocarina to me, and taught me a song which I originally believed was meant to open the door of time. I know now that the song she taught me in my dream has the power to manipulate time itself, so if what she said was accurate, I could play it and send us both back into the past," I said. "If we can do something like that, we'd have more time with which to figure out what Spike meant," said Twilight. "How much time remains?" I asked. "Your dream did take up much of it, so I'd say about a minute," replied Twilight. "Guess this is what Ganondorf meant when he said that this was just the beginning. Of course, I can't guarantee success upon playing the Song of Time, for what Zelda told me may not be correct despite what I just said. She could have just assumed that I would have the ability to manipulate time as a means of wanting to make me feel safe," I said. "Can we not take the chance?" asked Twilight. "No," I replied. "Then play that song, and see what happens. As clearly we need more time," said Twilight. Even though I was having doubts over the truth behind Zelda's words, I soon shook my head several times to indicate that I couldn't start doubting her, as she was my friend. No, I had to go through with this, so hopefully this is going to work, otherwise we're all as good as dead. Upon raising the Ocarina of Time in order to play it, instead of holding up the ocarina, I suddenly had what appeared to be a horn which had 5 different openings. "Hey! When did you get that instrument?" Twilight made a valid point, as when was I capable of playing a horn? Something didn't seem right with this, but there was no time to think about it. With mere seconds left, I've got to try and play the Song of Time using whatever this thing is. "Here goes nothing," I said. "You can do it," said Twilight. Without even worrying about everything around me, because that would just make me feel stressed out, I played the Song of Time, and found myself being surrounded in a strange light before it suddenly went white. Had I gone and done the right thing?
Or, did I end up making things even worse? To be continued. End of chapter.